Welcome back to Recipe Redemption. This is part 2 of our series on how to buy, drink, and appreciate wine. Click on the link above, I think, over here? I don't know. If you missed part 1 and want to learn more about buying wine. Otherwise, keep watching and we'll talk more about how to drink and appreciate wine. There are levels of wine appreciation. From this doesn't physically hurt to drink and gets me buzzed in 2 glasses and tastes good when I burp it, to the unctuous mouthfeel of this vintage paired with the subtle fruitiness on the palate behind surprisingly gentle tannins leads me to believe that the winemaker is probably left-handed, and while toasting the barrels was actually in the process of eating a toasted cheese sandwich. The hints of spice also indicate he has some Polish ancestry. Okay, it doesn't really get that bad, but it's close. Let's just say there are times when the tasting notes reach the "oh, come on" level of pretentiousness. I think there's a happy medium where you can learn to detect and appreciate the subtle variations from wine to wine without having to sport ironic facial hair or unnecessarily utilize the word eschew in conversation. If you're tasting several varietals, like if you're at an actual wine tasting or just a big evening in, I would recommend that you taste the white wines first, and then the reds. Go from most subtle to least, because the reds will tend to be a bit more aggressive than the whites, and you'll lose some of the subtleties of the whites if you taste them later. Another pro tip: drink the good stuff first. When you're able to appreciate it. After a few glasses, you don't care as much. Also, after a few glasses, of anything, you tend to experience sense blindness. You can get kind of oversaturated with all the flavors from the wines, and so some of the more subtle nuances might get lost on you later on. So the stuff that you're supposed to really appreciate, the good, expensive stuff, drink that first. Also, life is short, so drink the good stuff first. And I'm not saying that your host is really cheap if they don't offer you a really expensive wine right off the bat, as in, don't expect it to get any better as the evening goes on, but rather if you're the host, or if you expect to just open several bottles that night. To get the absolute most from the experience, this is the way you should go, especially in a social situation. Everyone is going to pay the most attention to the first glass of wine, because it's a fresh, new experience. After a few glasses, the drinking becomes more of a reflex, and maybe people aren't paying quite as much attention to it. So at that point, it's just a beverage. It's not an experience. Some things that you should have some water and some neutral flavored crackers, like oyster crackers. Not too salty, plain crackers around, to help cleanse the palate in between wines. Otherwise, your tasting of subsequent wines will be influenced by the lingering flavors and aromas of the wines that came before. Now, as far as serving wine, first, let's talk about decanting and breathing. Allowing, once you've opened the bottle, allowing the wine to breathe, to open up and have contact with the air. It allows some of the excess alcohol to evaporate off so you can actually taste the wine. Also allows some possibly unpleasant aromas time to dissipate. If they used sulfites to stabilize the wine in the process of fermentation, there may be the formation of some sulfur compounds which tend to smell kind of skunky. This gives them a chance to evaporate off before you actually try to taste it. So you should allow the wine to breathe for 15 to 20 minutes, particularly reds. And contact with oxygen starts a whole series of chemical reactions that create some of the complexity and the aromas and flavors that you're looking to experience. And try this experiment sometime. Take An inexpensive bottle of wine, so you're not wasting it. Immediately pour yourself 2 small half glasses. Taste one right now, and then wait about 20 minutes and taste the other one, and see if they don't taste different after allowing the wine a chance to open up. Decanting is another way that we do this, actually pouring the entire bottle into another container, a wine decanter. That's the whole point of this, is by pouring the whole bottle out, it gives the wine the maximum chance to mix with air and begin to open up better. It also technically gives you a chance to, if you feel like it, to strain the wine. If you pour it through a strainer into the decanter, if there's any sediment in the bottle of wine, you can actually strain those out and save yourself the trouble of having to pour so carefully that you don't pour the lees into people's glasses. Speaking of glasses, glassware is a huge topic in wine appreciation. Some people insist on having a whole collection of different sizes and shapes of glass for serving different types of wine. Some people insist on only serving in cut crystal. Others like to drink out of red Solo cups. What's best? Ultimately, simple, plain, standard wine glasses in the 8 to 10 ounce range are just fine for most wines. Big red wine goblets are cool. Not absolutely necessary. They do concentrate aromas well. They have this nice taper at the top, allow a nice big broad area which maximizes oxygen contact, and large volume allows you to swirl a lot better. But ultimately they're nice because they hold more wine. Champagne flutes, ta-da, are traditional for bubbly sparkling wines because they allow for visually pleasing bubbles to form and rise on the sides. But they don't have a whole lot of taper to them, so they don't really concentrate the aromas well as a glass that actually tapers inwards. It sort of funnels it towards your nose. So I feel like you don't really get the maximum experience from the nose. No. If you like the bubbles, then sure, go ahead. But for my money, and for your money, if you can only really have one wine glass around, plain old simple wine glass is really the best. Holds a decent amount. The tapered fluting helps direct aromas toward the nose at the top. The stem allows you to hold it without transferring heat from your hands to the wine, which is important for chilled white wines in particular. And the volume allows for proper swirling. Speaking of which, why swirl? You are aerating the wine more. As we've talked about, that's important. Getting it to release more of the volatile compounds that give you the nose or aroma of the wine. If it's freshly poured from an open bottle, if you're particularly eager, swirling also helps some of the excess alcohol to evaporate, like we've talked about. So you can actually smell the more subtle aromas of the nose and not just the alcohol. This is also the time when you can inspect the wine visually. Is the color not just pleasing to the eye, but also is it the correct color for this type of wine? If there's any excess oxidation that happened in the bottle or anything that might cause it to go bad, a lot of times it'll come through in the color. It won't be right, or it'll look watery. Also, a good chance to check for sediment in your glass. Do you have floaties in there? Having chewy bits does detract from the experience, so you kind of want to check for that. It's not necessarily an indication of a bad wine, but it can affect your experience of drinking it. So Also, when you swirl, a lot of times people will say to look for the legs. If you when you swirl, when you stop swirling, do you see little rivulets that run down the inside of the glass, and that tends to indicate the overall alcohol content. It's not a quantitative measure. You can't just say, oh, it's got these legs that take this long to drip down, so therefore it is 13.5% alcohol. No, but it tells you it's higher in alcohol. It doesn't actually matter that much, but if you're blind tasting and you're a particularly sensitive drinker, the difference in alcohol content might be detectable as added hotness in the wine. Now, the nose. Swirl. Place your nose at the top of the glass and inhale both through your nose and mouth. This allows the aromatic compounds to circulate not only through your sinuses, but also onto the back of your tongue. So you not only smell, but also sort of taste the aroma to a certain extent. Your sense of taste is over 50% smell. And don't just say, yeah, smells like wine. Really dig in and see if you can identify components of that smell. Flowers, fruit, other stuff. Does it smell good? Some people actually use what's called a scent box to help train themselves. It's a box with containers of items typically experienced with wines, so you can remind yourself what you're looking for. Or alternatively, if you smell something in the wine that you can't identify, you can use the scent box to kind of give yourself hints. Some qualities to think about. We talked about corking. We mentioned this. Causes that cardboard or wet dog smell. If you get that particularly in a restaurant, send it back. White wines, cat pee. There's a funky, tangy sort of smell in some Sauvignon Blancs that some people use to actually identify high quality, but it's eerily similar to the aroma that cat owners are all too familiar with. Skunkiness. We talked about sulfur compounds that linger after decanting. If you've already decanted or allowed a wine to breathe and it still smells kind of skunky, then it's a sign that you should return that wine. Madeirization. This is less on the nose and more on the palate. Wines that have had exposure to oxygen in the bottle can go too far in that oxidation, and it's beyond being aged and actually becomes Madeirized, and they call it that because it tastes like Madeira. You'll notice a caramel color. It's not really red, particularly around where it's thin, right at the top. When you're swirling it around, as the light comes through it, you'll see kind of a brownish caramel color. And actually kind of a caramel flavor when you taste it, and that's not characteristic of that variety of wine. Can remind you of like cheap sherry. Depending on the wine, it can be a good or bad thing, but for a casual drinker, it's to be avoided. It's an indication that the wine has actually aged too long or just has gone bad. So. Generally, brown wine is a bad sign. Should also look, while swirling, at the clarity. Does it look cloudy? I mean, obviously, a dark red wine is going to be dark, but you should still be able to see light through it if you hold it up to a bright enough light. If you can't, if it actually looks cloudy, that can be a sign of secondary fermentation, oxidation, bacterial contamination. Visible sediments sometimes happen and is usually okay, but it'll settle to the bottom. It doesn't make the wine cloudy. But generally speaking, if there's a lot of stuff floating in your wine, it might be a sign that something isn't right. So now it's time to actually taste the wine, and about time too. Once you've appreciated the nose as much as you feel like doing, take a sip. Don't immediately swallow it, but take a moment to roll it around in your mouth for a bit, so your entire mouth has a chance to experience the wine, and so it hits every taste bud. and then carefully draw a little air in through your mouth and bubble it through the wine. This is sometimes called whistling the wine. This aerates it some more. It's all about oxygen content. Gives your olfactory system another chance to experience the aroma of the wine while your mouth tastes it. Engage all your senses while tasting the wine and see what you get out of it. Okay, some things to think about. The texture, the mouthfeel. Does it almost feel thick in viscosity? Some wines have that, and it's an interesting feeling. Oftentimes, they'll describe it as a very chewy wine because it's almost feels thick enough that you could chew it, even though that's kind of an artificial sensation. That's still what it feels like. Does it have a drying or astringent quality to it? Those things. Minerality. Some soils where wine grapes are grown impart a chemical fingerprint to the finished wine that comes through as a specific mineral flavor, particularly with white wines. So some wines are described as flinty, chalky, those sort of things. It exists in reds too, but there's so much else going on with reds that sometimes those mineral notes are masked by like heavy tannins and things. They're still there, and if you become sensitive enough, you might be able to get them. Overall, how aggressive is it? With reds, you're talking about the tannins. In whites, it's oakiness. How high is the acid content? How how kind of acidic does it taste? How sour is it? Obviously, the aromas and flavors that you're getting as far as fruits or other aspects to it, grassiness, those sorts of things. And is it sweet or is it dry? Those are the descriptive words for the amount of residual sugar, or at least your experience of residual sugar. Dry doesn't obviously mean that there is no water in it. It refers to it being less sweet. So I've got a red here. Now this is, I don't remember. No, this is a Cabernet Sauvignon. Wow, I don't remember what I poured for myself. Other familiar varietals that you might see in the stores, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Syrah or Shiraz, Merlot, Zinfandel, Pinot Noir, Malbec, Sangiovese, Nebbiolo, Chianti is a big one from Italy. Some things to look for. Tannins. You get those from the grape skins. And to an extent also from being aged in barrels. How heavy or aggressive is the wine? There are, particularly with Cabernet Sauvignons, this one's not too bad. They're there. They do lend a certain astringency to the wine. That's making it hard for me to talk. I haven't had that much to drink yet. But they can be really aggressive, particularly in some Cabernet Sauvignons that really grab you by the short and curlies. How aggressive is it? That will determine a lot of what you can pair this with if you're going to pair it with something. How acidic is it? Are there floral aromas? In red wines, they're typically lost amid the stronger notes, but might be detectable if you're particularly sensitive. Fruit. In red wines, you're typically looking for things like stone fruits, peach, cherry, possibly cranberry, pomegranate, berries, blackberry, particularly maybe blueberry or boysenberry, and can also be expressed as jamminess. Even though the wine might not taste sweet, it might smell sweet. And comes through as what they describe as jamminess. So it smells. If you smell fruit preserves, they do actually. Yes, they smell like the fruit that they came from, but they smell different. They have a very distinctive fruit preserve smell, and that's what they're going for with the jamminess. Um, Particularly in the reds, you're looking for things like smokiness. And you can, especially if there's fruitiness, you can actually get a combination of smokiness and the fruit to give you the impression of a specific fruit wood, like apple wood or cherry wood. Also, you might get tobacco or incense. Occasionally, things like sandalwood and spices as well. You can detect flavors like black or white pepper, mulling spices, those sorts of things. Leather. You'll sometimes get the expression of leather scent. I'm not getting out of this. This is more fruit forward. This definitely has cherry with a little bit of sandalwood to it. Every now and then you'll get a wine that actually has kind of a licorice or anise flavor to it. Not very common, but it can happen. And I've even actually had some wines that the fruitiness and the sort of jamminess went in a direction that actually reminded me of red vines. Which was weird, but it wasn't necessarily bad. Now, let's talk about white wines. I don't have one here right now, but tasting white wines. Your major varietals: Chardonnay, Chablis, Chenin Blanc, Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon, Pinot Gris or Pinot Grigio. And you also have a lot of the dessert wines are whites: Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Sauterne, all those. Lots of others. Things to look for, particularly with the white wines, sweetness versus dryness. You're going to find that there are white wines that tend to be a little sweeter, but they're typically meant as dessert wines. And mind you, that there are Rieslings and Gewürztraminers and ones that you might identify as a sweet wine, but they can be produced in a way that they are a dry Riesling or a dry Gewürztraminer. Keep your eye out for those, because those are fantastic, and not everybody knows about them. Again, with white wines, looking for acidity and minerality. Because white wines, you actually taste the barrel that they're in. If they were actually aged in oak barrels, you'll get butteriness, toast, vanilla. A lot of those flavors come from the barrel. Because white wines tend to be lighter, you're going to get more floral aromas and fruit aromas and flavors. So fruit tree blossoms in particular. You can have other floral scents. I've gotten jasmine, dogwood, those sorts of things. As far as fruit, citrus is really, really common, and you might even be able to differentiate between sort of orange, lemon, grapefruit sorts of citrus flavors, or even citrus zest or rind. I've also gotten apple, both sour and sweet apples, pear, some stone fruits like peach, apricot, melon, honeydew, cantaloupe, also common. Banana happens, but it's rare. Spices, baking spices, apple pie, ginger, those sorts of things. You sometimes will get wet stones, and some of the drier wines, you'll get this sort of sensation of the smell of wet stones. It's very distinct. You'll know it when you come across it. Ocean spray, that sometimes people experience an aroma that reminds them of ocean spray, like the actual ocean, not the cranberry juice. Herbs, they may or may not be identifiable as a specific herb or modifier of another one, specifically something like lemongrass rather than just lemon in an herb, for example. We mentioned cat pee before for the Sauvignon Blanc. I don't really look for that, but one thing you should look for is acetone. It might be due to excessive volatile acidity, sometimes due to post-fermentation contamination with bacteria, which turns some of the alcohol to vinegar. It's probably not acetone that you're smelling, and it isn't harmful. But if you're sensitive to it, it can ruin the enjoyment of the wine unless you really like nail polish for some reason. Nail polish remover. No judgment. Weirdo. um, and I suppose we should talk a little bit about rosés. Rosés are made from a hybrid of processes between white and red wines. Typically, they're made from red wine grapes that are allowed to have contact with the grape skins for a short period of time, but not for the entire process. So it imparts a little bit of color and a little bit of that red sort of red wine flavor to the finished wine, but not a lot of the stronger flavors that come through if you were to allow it to stay in contact with the skins. So they usually tend toward more subtle versions of their red wine relatives. Bright fruit forward aspects. You might actually get strawberry, cherry, melon, those sorts of things, rhubarb, and can run the gamut from dry to sweet. And some are even produced as sparkling wine with a secondary fermentation. We won't really go into rosés as much. The tasting notes are the exact same, or the technique that you use. Visually inspect, swirl, sniff, taste. You're just going to get a different experience from a red wine. So, that is a quick, and believe me, this is a quick crash course into tasting wines. There's so much more, but if you dig it, if you get into tasting wines and want to learn more, I would highly recommend taking a class. Find someone who's actually an experienced sommelier to lead you through some more of the subtler nuances of tasting wines and appreciating them. And there are lots of different things that you can do at a tasting. You can have a typical tasting. If you just go into a winery, they want to give you a sampling of everything they have, so that maybe you might want to buy one. If you go into a class, they want you to focus more on learning about wine in general, not a particular producer's wine necessarily. So it might be all reds or all whites, or a vertical tasting where you can do all of one particular varietal at different price points or different ages, so you can sort of start to see the difference of what aging does to a particular varietal, or how one varietal that's produced in several different places, how the terroir actually affects that particular variety of wine. Or just an opportunity to taste a whole bunch of reds or a whole bunch of whites to see what kinds that you like, and get an idea of, if you're pairing them with food, for example, what wines would work best with what foods. So, I highly encourage you, if you're interested in learning more about wines, to look up classes at your local community college or community center. If you have a culinary school near where you live, they probably also offer classes to the public, those sorts of things. There are probably cooking classes that also deal with wine tasting. So just look around, and I'm sure you'll be able to find something. And I applaud you in taking the first step toward appreciating wine more. If you have any questions or comments of things that I should have covered in this, obviously there's probably plenty I could have talked about, but leave a comment down below. Let me know if I do another segment on wine, what questions would you like answered that you can't look up for yourself. I will see if I can make another episode out of it. Until then, I'd like to thank you for watching. I'm Mike Uyak, and I'll see you next time here on Recipe Redemption.